was never really about putting a lot of power in the car. I wanted to drive better. As you see what it is now, it runs like stock. It's a turnkey, fuel in, just go and drive. It's a different kind of thrill. Some would argue a turbocharged is better. Some would argue an NNE is better, but it's all up to you. What thrill would you prefer? My name's Raedi, and I drive a 2007 Proton Satria Neo. Well, I think as a boy, we are genuinely attracted to toys. I think I enjoyed playing with Legos and remote control cars a lot, so probably that's how the interest was fueled up towards the years. I'm genuinely attracted to most cars that I see. I see values in each individual car, but if you want to say a dream car, I would like to probably own a Porsche one day. Any 911 would do. Virtual encounter was primarily what fueled the interest. I've had elderly cousins who played around with some cars and their friends, so having that sort of exposure made me want to dive deeper into that hole, you would say. Yeah. That was an interesting story. So there was a point of time where, I think I was privileged enough to have my father offered me a car. I had a few in mind at that time. I think during school I had this love for the Satria GTI. When it first came out in 99, 2000. If you want to call that a dream car, it would still be one of my dream cars right now. You can call it too. We had some sort of a small argument where my father would not really prefer a second-hand car. So I had a few in mind. I would either go for the Satria GTI, or there was a few Hondas at that time. Those four-door EKs or four-door EGs. I really liked those at that time. But the Neo came out as a surprise, so I'm pretty thankful to have it. It was a 1.6 M line, so it's the difference between the high line was it has no airbags, no ABS, but everything else is just about the same. Yeah. There's a lot of hands involved in the car, so mainly from people of my closer circles. I would say people, it was initially from Rampage, from Fat Boy Racing, and then from R&R. So all of them were involved in their own specific ways, and they've helped me a lot to guide me to get where the car is now. There was never really an inspiration behind the build. I would say there's some inspirations here and there where I wanted to make certain packages in terms of tuning and electronics, but it was my vision because the car handles good. It is a great car to drive, but it just lacks a lot of power. I wanted to feel something like how when you first drove a Satria GTI, for example. It didn't have a lot of power, but it was ample. It could move on its own. It doesn't struggle to move. So that was how I wanted the car to be. That's how the engine swap come into place. It was never really about putting a lot of power in the car. I wanted to drive better. I wanted to be a drivable daily car. So I think people would give me a lot of hate from when I say the car is stock, but my vision for the car was mainly, as you see what it is now, it runs like stock. It's a turnkey, fuel in, just go and drive. There's nothing that you need to really worry about, but it's just a better car than what it is now, than it came out from the factory, at least from my point of view. Well, the car has gone through a lot of modifications, but at its current state, it's running an engine from a Mitsubishi 1.8, a 4G93 with a Mivec head swap. It has a Mitsubishi Mivec close ratio gearbox with an LSD. In terms of electronics package, it's all full built harness, standalone ECU with all the sensors and jiggles onto it. But before at that state, it was running a Campro previously. I've had a few Campros, went through at least 2 engine blocks and a few heads. It was turbocharged before as a Campro, and then I went on to the Mitsubishi route right now. The Campro, it was good in its own ways, but at that time, those years when I was involved with that engine, it did not make sense because cost over gains. I wanted reliability. It made decent power, but it wasn't really reliable. And at that time where engine management systems were, you don't really have a lot of choice and they were pretty expensive at that time. So to properly turbocharge a car, what you need, the base is you need good fuel and good fuel control. Engine management, your injectors and pumps and ignition control, things like that. So during that time, we didn't have that privilege to go through high-end electronics, because options were very limited to us. Probably another reason why I wouldn't turbocharge my Neo again, because in comparison with other chassis in the family, the engine bay is quite small. So for me, myself at least, some people are running okay, but it's just that I didn't quite like how heat management was an issue in the engine bay. It was pretty small. So I think with the setup that I have now, with the power that I have now, it's just good enough for me anyways. There are certain regrets. It's a different kind of thrill. Some would argue a turbocharge is better. Some would argue an NNE is better, but it's all up to you. What thrill would you prefer? I wouldn't want to put the Campro generation, I wouldn't want to give it a lot of hate because it was also designed in the time where emissions were strict. As a manufacturer, they had to comply to that. So that's the output that you get out of it. You don't get what you expected. If you want to compare it to the years of the old B16s, the old Mivecs, the old Mitsubishi engines, they didn't have that restriction at that time. You don't have things like emission control. You don't have Euro standards, not just in terms of output, but in terms of manufacturing with the materials that you use. So I think mainly why I went for an older engine, because I did not need to spend a lot to gain a lot. And I can run it reliably and comfortably as I want it to be. Yeah. So I would consider the current build, how I took it seriously, it would start from 2015. The car's from 07, so I think from 07, those days, it was more of a trial and error. How do I get things moving? How do I make it faster? But I think from 2015 is where I actually had a target what I wanted for the car. It started with the engine swap. My main focus was on electronics, the engine management system. I wanted the car to be with the modern ages. It's like how you modernize an old car. I didn't want to be left behind in that sense. The main focus was a lot on electronics, on engine management system, on sensors, on feedback controllers. Up to the recent, I've had, this is the second ECU that's running now. It's an upgrade from the previous one, so it's currently running a Link G4, and it runs a drive-by-wire system. On the contrary, why people would prefer cable over drive-by-wire, I would prefer drive-by-wire over cable. It's so much easier to manage. The car itself is a treasure to me, but I would say I love the electronics, so I would say the electronics would be the most treasured part in the car. It takes a long time to configure. I mean, you would argue that tuning is just simple, but yes, tuning as a base, to get the power, it's not that difficult, but to have the car drivable every day, single kickstart on a cold start, idles well, so it takes like days and days of just constant calibration, getting logs, making small adjustments, getting back logs and making small adjustments in the end. So I think, yeah, the whole tuning and electronic package will probably be the most treasured part for me in the car. I wouldn't think I would part with the car, because the amount of effort, time and money spent into it, you can't justify putting a price on it. It would be ridiculous. People would say, why would you want to sell this at such a ridiculous price? At the end of the day, I'll probably just grow old with it, or have someone else who shares the same passion that I have towards the car, and to continue taking care of it. As of now, I think what it is right now, it's complete to how it is right now for me. Everything has been bundled together. A lot of things came in at the later stage, like a few years back. The car never really had a Mivec head initially, so it was just running a stock twin cam, and then the Mivec head came in a few years later with the gearbox and LSD. But in terms of my main focus was more on the electronics package to make it integrate with the OEM cluster air conditioning system. make the car easy to drive, easy to operate. I could probably give the keys to anyone and just drive it as it is. So in terms of any other plans to it, I don't think I do have right now. You have friends who will put ideas into you. What I've done with the car, how I think around with it, how I've worked on it at its current stage right now, how it feels right now, how it drives, and after taking it to the track, it really fuels the feeling for me to want to dive deeper into this rabbit hole of a hobby. You know. So I'm in the IT field. By profession, I am an infrastructure engineer. So I'm a Windows Server engineer. So I deal with mostly infrastructure back-end work, the design level, operations and maintaining of the back-end infrastructure. So I have my clients that I service. I build the infrastructure for you as an end user, or how you want to use your product as it is. So I was pretty much interested in the tuning aspect of the hobby. My car was mainly tuned by RN Autosports, but I've also had developed a certain, interest towards that. So that's why I started playing around with it. I wanted to tweak it in such that I wanted to make it feel like how I want it to feel. I do a lot of, I would say, off-site calibration. So once the car is done, I'll do things like, startup maps or cruise maps, things like that. Drivability things, how to make it an efficient car, a pleasant car to drive. But I've had a lot of help from them. So my tuner does give me a lot of guides and tips, and also friends in forums, things like that. Would I consider it to be a hobby? Yeah, maybe. I would want to do more tuning, and I do like wiring a lot. Building harnesses, yes, but troubleshoot wiring is not so much. It's a bit of a headache. But I enjoy doing wiring and tuning and calibration and sort of stuff. Yeah. To be frank, right now, in terms of benefits, it's helping me funding it, yes. But in terms of skill set, if I were more into the software developing area, that would benefit more in the automotive field, especially with things like vehicle integration and CAN bus programming. So modern day vehicles right now, they rely on CAN bus to send data, send control sets over a single bus line, over 2 wires, so it makes everything simple. But when you want to talk about from aftermarket perspective, especially as a hobbyist, it makes it a bit difficult for you to mod a modern day car. So people have been taken interest into sniffing CAN data and making sense out of the raw data and interpret what it is. So it's a bit of cat and mouse thing. You need to find what the ECU, what the vehicle is talking, for you to be able to understand, to talk to it and make it do as what you want. So I think people who are good in software development would benefit a lot in this area, especially with vehicle integration, vehicle calibration things. There will be a good future for this in the aftermarket field, where people start offering aftermarket ECUs to modern cars. So with tuning, fuel makes a big difference. So generally, a higher octane fuel, you will be able to cater for a more advanced performance tuning. So with Shell V-Power, I was able to optimize my tuning for optimal peak power and performance, while also maintaining very good fuel efficiency. So at one point of time, I did consider, the automotive sector as a career path. That was why initially I went for that course right after high school graduation. But as of now, I think it's been over 10, 15 years. From my observation, the progress and the opportunities that we have for, our talents right now here is very limited. For one to make a viable living, especially with inflation right now and the rise of cost of living and the limited career paths you have, especially in this sector, I don't think it will be a choice for me at the moment, maybe in the future. Because I'm not just talking about from the big industry or manufacturer point of view. We don't have a lot of car makers for young graduates to join and to grow with, be a part and put their ideas in. Not just that, but even in the aftermarket scene, our culture and our people, we still lack appreciation for value. I believe we need to educate people more on this sector, be it in a big industry or a small side, for it to actually grow, and be viable for everyone. Because I could be a wireman or a tuner overseas in another country and still make a decent living like what I'm doing now, but you can't do that here. It's a bit sad really, because like I said, our people lack that sort of appreciation, that value. So it forces these people to squeeze more out of themselves. They have somehow lost value in them. They don't know what's their worth, what's my work is worth. Even, come on, right now if you see the general people, even 20 ringgit is a lot of money to them just for service. Whereas you could probably spend more money elsewhere, but you tend to be finicky on this. You want to cut corners in it. So how do you expect this industry to grow if you don't support it properly? My name is Raedi, and this is my man and machine story.